Welcome to the Profit Cash Growth Podcast. This is the podcast for 6 and 7 figure business owners who are looking to grow a financially successful business. My co-host Claire Hancock is a finance director, chartered accountant and entrepreneur. And every week I'll be exploring guidance and frameworks designed to help you increase your profits, improve your cash flow and grow your business. This week on the podcast, why are Britain's pub owners struggling to make a good profit per pint? And a SWOT analysis, is it just for corporate training rooms? Or can you use it in your small business? So this week, I want to tell you a interesting story about a company that invoiced me nearly a year later. It's a large gas and electric company, and they were doing a gas check on one of the properties that I own. And it was last April that we had the gas check on it. And obviously, naturally, I'm not chasing people for invoices. So they did the gas check, they went away. A year's gone by, and just last week I was chased for the invoice. Now, they claimed they'd sent me the invoice. I'd never been sent the invoice, so it must have been a bit of an internal process their end. But if we went under the bonnet of that particular organisation, Claire, we're talking April's the works were done. February is the first time that they've chased me for that invoice. What do you think we'd see under the bonnet of that organisation culture-wise, and how do people continue to run a business like that?
Yeah, definitely cash flow is the first thing that springs to mind. You got a whole year before invoicing your customer. That's bonkers. You've paid your staff for wages. You've got raw materials. Obviously, electricity and gas is obvious. But no matter what business it is, there is a cost of delivery. So to go a whole year before even chasing an overdue invoice is absolutely absurd. And also there would have been VAT on it. So you would have paid VAT over to HMRC on that invoice as well. So yeah, definitely there would be a cash flow impact, but also kind of makes me think, what is going on here in terms of attention to detail? That is sort of an indication that perhaps this company is lacking attention to detail, because the simple processes and procedures are not in place if you're not able to identify that somebody hasn't paid an invoice.
I know. I guess that's what I was going to allude to, because you've come up with some very interesting tips that you tell people over time about the processes they should follow in their business, in their credit control departments. And they obviously believe they sent me the invoice back in April, but for the first time for them to even check that it hadn't gone into junk, or you hadn't just missed it, was February, the year later. I mean, what is the process that they should have followed, Claire?
Yeah, so as a minimum, every business should have what we would call an aged debtors report, which takes all of your unpaid invoices and it will tell you how old they are. So you can either do that from the date of the invoice, or you can do that from the date of the payment being due. So either way you look at it, it will group it normally into columns. So you'll say, are they current invoices? Are they older than 30 days? Are they older than 60 days? And are they older than 90 days? And when I worked as a finance director, my finance team at one point, we were collecting, 25, 30 million pounds a month. So we're talking huge numbers. But that 90 plus column, the target was always to have that at zero. That was always the target of the credit control team. So we never allowed a customer to slip more than 60 plus days before they paid us. And that was really, really critical. And that was something that we talked about every single week when we had our team meetings, was what is in that 90 plus and what actions is every single person doing, including myself. That would normally be the tricky, sticky customers that I might have to jump on a call with and things like that. So yeah, that was a massive focus of the team to keep that 90 plus down to zero.
And when we work with businesses, they say that businesses go out of business through cash flow, not profitability. And is it any wonder if a business can't chase for the first time their supplier in nearly a year? So what a shocker this week. Just a little story. I thought it was relevant to the stuff that we cover, so I wanted to share it. Anyway, let's talk about the news now. So this week in the news, why are Britain's pubs struggling to make a good profit on a pint now? So the average profit per pint in 2019 was 27 pence. The average profit per pint in 2024 is as low as 12 pence per pint. Now, apart from anything else, I was surprised by just how narrow those margins are on a single pint within a pub. But if you look at the overall cost of a pint, it's gone from £3.81 to £4.80 in that time. So the overall cost of the pint is at £1 and a penny, but the profits are down from 27p to 12p. Claire, what do you think they can do, and why do you think this is happening?
Yeah, it's interesting how much the profit on a pint has dropped. Obviously, everybody knows that in that time, VAT rates have changed. I think back at that point, VAT was actually 17.5% as well, not in 2019, but a few years ago. So that crept into definitely nibbling away at the profit that pubs make. But one of the things that I was quite shocked to read actually lately was if you look at the number of people employed by pubs and bars in the UK, the number of people employed has stayed fairly static at around 500,000 people. But the number of pubs has declined, which is an indication that actually the cost of employment, so the number of people working in each pub, is going up. And therefore, if your labour cost is consistently going up, then that's, of course, going to eat away at your profit margins. And you see that in the types of services that pubs now offer. You go into any pub and most of them do cocktails, and cocktails take bloody forever to make. I've stood at many a bar being frustrated at why I didn't just order a gin and tonic because somebody's messing around putting basil and all sorts in my drink. And yeah, that takes time.
But they cost 2-3 times the price of a pint of beer. So, in theory, bottom line, they should pay for themselves. I don't think that's the biggest challenge. Do you think that the volume of people going into pubs is reducing, and therefore, why are people not cutting their labour? Is that just delaying an inevitably difficult conversation that they should be having, or something else?
No, I think our expectations on service have got wildly out of control. We all seem to want immediate service, no queue. We want to be able to order on app and have table service, all of those types of things. And there is a cost to that. But if you think about cocktails, like my example that we just spoke about, I don't think that it's necessarily true that you say, well, you pay twice as much. Because a classic gin and tonic, for example, I know I spent many of my teen years working in pubs in evenings and weekends. And making a gin and tonic, you literally do it in 30 seconds. And the ingredients that go into it are cheap and they're pre-measured. You put your glass up against the optic and you get a measure of gin in it. Now, it's not like that with cocktails. They've got all these fancy ingredients in them, fresh fruit, herbs, spices, all of these, sometimes they're even flaming the top of it. There's a cost to that. And so, yes, cocktails might be twice as much, but they probably take 4 or 5 times as long to make. And the cost of ingredients is probably more than double that plain gin and tonic. So I actually think the profit margins are much lower. So you're saying
the reason that they can't make money on a pint is due to the cocktails?
Well, I think generally they are not making as much money on a pint because people are switching to other drinks that there are not as much margin on. And therefore the competition around serving a pint at a good price has become more. When you used to go into a pub, 20 years ago, you had pints or soft drinks or basic spirits like gin and tonics, whiskey, that type of thing. Now, there's so much choice that actually people will go into a pub and maybe order a cocktail or they'll order a craft beer in a bottle. And so therefore the demand for pints has decreased a lot, and therefore the price becomes more important and they're having to compete on price.
So if I'm charging £4.80 for a pint of lager, why am I not just charging £5.10? If my profit per pint's gone from 27 pence to 12 pence, why would I not just charge 30 pence more for it to make sure that I maintain my profit margin? Why aren't business owners doing that small top line pricing decision?
I think that the barrier of going over £5 a pint is a massive psychological thing. I can remember when I was probably 17, 18 working in a bar, and the price of a pint went from £2.50, you could get 2 pints for a £5, and it crossed into, it was £2.60, and that £5.20 was literally, people talked and whinged about that for months. That was a real psychological barrier. So I think if you can't get 2 pints for a tenner now, I think that in itself is a psychological barrier. Even if it isn't for the punters, it probably is for the business owner. They just can't comprehend that's going to happen. But
at some point it's going to happen, isn't it now?
Saying that, I've just said 20 years ago, it was £5 a pint. So, £2.50 a pint. So with inflation, saying it's £5 a pint these days doesn't seem that unrealistic.
Would you accept making 12 pence profit on your £4.80 pint if you were running the pub?
It's interesting, isn't it? Because it's not...
Is a better question, do business owners know they're only making 12 pence? Or is that because somebody's analysed the numbers and the business owner isn't in touch with his numbers? Because that's, is it worth serving the pint for 12 pence?
Yeah, definitely not all pubs are making those margins. I think this was a particularly wide statistic analysis done, which include the likes of Wetherspoons in there, for example, and Wetherspoons are literally making pence per pint. So
high volume,
so it's certainly not industry norm that all pubs will be making that. And depending on what beer you've got, craft beer, for example, should be at high margin, but the sort of the big well-known brands would be at lower margins, because the breweries that are selling those brands have so much more control in the marketplace.
And obviously, it's been particularly tough for pub owners. The big issues stated that are causing this within the article are obviously, let's start with minimum wage increase. I mean, it's hitting me hard as well. I mean, they put £1 on minimum wage a few years ago. They're putting another £1 on in April. It's incredibly painful. I mean, it's really bringing up your bottom line. Great for national living wage, and it is the right thing to do. But I think business owners struggle to then put that money onto their products and pass that on to the consumer. You've got energy bills obviously crippling for them, and hopefully looking at the peak to trough, that will be a short-term thing that they can come out the other end of. Taking out debt during COVID is a big one, that now they have interest payments that have now rocketed on top of that. And there's also an element of suggestion that the footfall in pubs has settled still slightly less than pre-pandemic. So we're not seeing the people returning to the pubs in the way that they were pre-pandemic. And that might improve as time goes on. But that's quite a lot of things to deal with as a business owner. What further things could they do? What would you be advising them?
It's interesting, really, because I think if you look at like the history of pubs, going back to like the 1980s, when the legislation changed around pub ownership, and they limited breweries to owning a maximum of, I think it was 2,000 pubs, because at the time the government were particularly concerned about the monopoly that the breweries had. They owned, I think it was like 70% of all pubs in the UK were controlled by the big six breweries. So they changed the legislation with the aim of there being more independence. And actually slowly we have seen that, because we went from around about a third of pubs being independent owned to now about 50% of pubs are independent owned. And so I think that it's fair to say that there is an element of lifestyle with these pubs. And I think when you speak to a lot of landlords that own their own pubs, or even that work for the breweries and lease them, they feel like they're at the heart of their community, and they're not running these as businesses. And I think therein lies the issue. They live in the property, and often they raise their family in the property, and they know all the locals, they're in local communities. So I think that is where the heart of the issue lies, is that this boundary between somebody's running a pub for your lifestyle and running a pub for profit is so blurred. And I don't necessarily think these people are commercially minded, nor do they want to be. They're doing this because they love it, and they just want to make enough money to live.
We've seen that ourselves locally. We've seen a local pub that's been bought up. I mean, they bought the whole freehold, the building. It was a fantastic price for it, and they've reopened it as a pub, haven't they? And they have changed nothing. They've not even put a sign up to say it's open, let alone under new management. And that pub's not been a pub for 6 years. In fact, it's been a homeless shelter for all that time. So, is that a business owner that's bought that, or is that somebody that liked the idea of buying a pub, had a bit of money, thought it's a great building as well, and hope for the best?
Yeah, and I know exactly which pub you're talking about, and it drives me bonkers, because it's on one of the main roads through the town centre. And like you say,
on the roundabout,
I do not understand why there is not a sign outside saying under new management, open, we sell beer, anything.
Open,
because
anything.
it looks exactly like it was like a food bank before. And the branding for the pub always remained there. It was a pub years ago. I think it's called the Black Horse or the Black Lion. And that sign remained there even when it was like a homeless shelter and food bank. And so it doesn't look any different from the outside. So do people know it's open? And it's never busy. So I actually think our town centre is a really interesting. We live in Leighton Buzzard, and for a town centre, there's hardly anything there. There's no restaurant stuff. There's all pubs, and hardly any of them do food. But we seem to have such a culture in our town centre of these pubs being rammed with drinkers. And it's very, very unusual, actually, because there's often a thought these days that to survive, pubs need to serve food, and that's where the money is. But not in our town. All of the pubs do live music and things like that, and they're really sort of like drinkers pubs serving cask ales and all of these types of things, but they're rammed constantly, and they seem to be thriving.
Yeah, I think it's like anything. If you've got the right formula, then you'll do well. So anyway, let's move on. So before we move on to this week's deep dive, I just wanted to quickly touch on last week, Claire. We were talking about A players and B players, and I literally heard on another podcast somebody talking about A players and B players in the same way that you were last week. And I just picked up a couple of stats that really surprised me. There is a study, I must dig this out because I'm sure it's fascinating, but there's a study about being around what we would call these A players and B players in your working environment. So this was more to do with sitting next to people in the corporate environment and things like that. So the stat said that sitting next to an underperformer in your organization will double the level of your own underperformance. However, sitting next to an overperformer can increase your performance by 15%. So the differential between sitting next to an underperformer is almost 3 times as damaging as sitting next to an overperformer. I just thought that was fascinating in that study, and why we're constantly told that you are a culture of the environment that you surround yourself with.
I think that's absolutely fascinating, actually. I mean, I think back to even, when we were at school, I was a class clown at school. There's no doubt about that. And I look back now, and now I know stats like that. I'm thinking, oh my goodness, like the impact, the poor people that had to sit next to me, the potential for them to learn from me, because, I was... not to blow my own trumpet, but I was quite academically gifted. I didn't have to try very hard in school. And if I'd just applied myself, I would have rocketed, but also potentially the people around me. But it's definitely probably something for small business owners to have in the back of their mind a lot, because it's very difficult to deal with underperformers. Even from a legal perspective, it's difficult to deal with underperformers, but from an emotional impact of you as the manager, having to even have that conversation with somebody is horrible. Giving constructive feedback to somebody, it is very, very difficult.
And in a large organization, you can carry those people. In the type of organizations that we talk to, you simply can't carry them. They will destroy your business, and they'll take everyone else down with it.
Yeah. And
difficult.
There's loads of reasons why people underperform. Sometimes it's a temporary thing. Potentially something's going on in their life, which means they're underperforming, and you want to support them and bear with them because you're confident they'll come out the other side. But sometimes people are just not cut out to do the job that you want them to do, or something changes in the business and the demand on them changes. And particularly in small businesses, like you say, you can't carry... I don't like this phrase, but I think it sums it up quite well. You can't carry dead weight. You've really got to deal with these people, because where you've only got a handful of people in the office, if everybody is impacted by just 15% of negativity from this person, then that's quite a significant reduction in output and morale and results for the business.
Sure. So this week's deep dive is all about SWOT analyses. And is a SWOT analysis just a corporate training tool that we're all used to doing, or has it actually got a place in the small business? So we've been watching Claire's YouTube video on this, and you can see that as well on her YouTube channel, Profit Cash Growth. And Claire's going to tell us a little bit about SWOT analyses and how you can use them in your business.
Yes, I absolutely love a SWOT analysis. I think it's a really underrated tool that businesses tend not to use. You see them a lot in formal business plans, actually, like if you're going to a bank or an investor for funding. But often they're not used on a day-to-day basis. And actually, once you've got a SWOT analysis, really, you probably just need to look at it once a quarter and keep it updated. I think why I really value a SWOT analysis is when you're thinking about growing your business, you can get quite carried away with wacky ideas and out the box thinking, which is fantastic to do and can be very exciting, and can be a great tool to do some sort of blue sky thinking when it comes to brainstorming. But to bring it back to what's most likely to work in your business, you've got to tie it back to the strengths of your business. If you are a business that's particularly good at service delivery and logistics, for example, then coming up with an idea that requires you to do really heavy sales and marketing, which might sit in your weaknesses, is probably not the right strategy for you to use to grow your business. So it's a really good way of wheedling out some of those ideas and thinking, is this the right fit for us in terms of your growth strategy?
It's interesting because you sort of talked about that as the individual's weakness and not specifically the business's weakness. I always look at SWOT analysis as being specifically about the business. Would you make it broader than that and look at the skills within the business and how they deploy them rather than the business itself and the market it sits in?
So when I gave that example there, I was talking about the business mostly. I tend to work with two different types of businesses. I think there's businesses that are really good at customer acquisition, so sales and marketing. They're really good at lead magnets and drawing leads in and making those relationships and converting customers to buy. And then there's businesses that are very good at the service delivery, the operational side of things. And you tend to not find small businesses good at both, actually, which is quite interesting. And I think that that's okay, because if you're really good at sales and marketing, then actually you're going to have a constant feed of customers into your business. But if you're really good at service delivery, then you're likely to have very loyal customers. So it might be a bit more difficult to find customers, but they'll be incredibly loyal, and you'll probably get a lot of organic growth through word of mouth and recommendations. So one isn't necessarily better than the other, but you can see how, if you're a business that, perhaps you wouldn't put sales and marketing in your strength bucket, why go and come up with a growth strategy that is dependent on a really strong sales and marketing strategy? That just wouldn't make sense.
Or would you use it to recognize that you are lacking in that sales and marketing function and therefore go out to fulfill the blind spot that you have there in order to grow, rather than define your strategy by your weaknesses, which is what you've just described? Actually use this to plug those weaknesses to ensure your business can power through those weaknesses.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's 4 segments on a SWOT analysis, isn't there? There's strengths and weaknesses, which is your internal thing. So that would be, what is your team members good at? You talk about things like length of service. Well, we've got a really steady team that's got lots of knowledge. You might say we've got some very expensive equipment that our competitors can't buy. So there would be your strengths, or your weaknesses would obviously be the things that you're lacking, such as we don't have a sales and marketing team. And then you've got your external factors, which is your opportunities and threats. So there you might talk about your competitors, government policy, all of those types of things would be external factors. Yep. And your strengths and your opportunities is where your growth should come in. You should grow in those areas. And your weaknesses and your threats should be where you should be focusing on mitigating the risk. So like you've just said, Simon, if you identify that sales and marketing is actually your weakness, then you should be thinking about how do I mitigate that risk and reduce that risk? And that would be to go and recruit somebody potentially.
Yeah, that makes sense. So to tie this back into the theme of the week, the pub owner, can we do a live, very quick SWOT analysis so people understand how this would work in a practical environment? So if you were a pub owner, let's work through those strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats quite quickly, and just to show what the framework looks like and then how you can use it.
Yeah, absolutely. So why don't we use that pub that we spoke about on the roundabout that's just reopened, that used to be the food bank? Because just maybe they'll listen to this and get a few tips from it. Yeah. So certainly in that strengths category would be a location. Yeah.
Superb. Absolutely.
It's a bit of a landmark in town and everybody knows about it. But our town centre is also quite small, so that will come into it as well. Like actually, the cost of marketing is going to be really low. So from that perspective, that would be a massive strength.
Yeah, because they could actually utilize their building itself as the marketing for that, and that's free marketing. They've got a huge building, plenty of room to put up signs, billboards, or whatever they want to actually get their message across in a phenomenal location. So that's a huge strength to them in terms of their ability to market what they do, and also do that at little to no cost.
Yeah. I also think another strength it's got going for it is that it's in a beautiful listed building, like that it's got old beams and exposed woodwork, and it really is quite special as well. So I think that would be a massive strength that I would be leaning into a little bit more as well if I owned that pub. Probably on the weaknesses front, I would say that it's probably got a bit of a reputation, because everybody knows it as the homeless shelter and the food bank. So they've got to somehow shake that off. And probably I would say that its location, it doesn't have a beer garden. So that is going to be a problem. How are they going to counteract that in the summertime? Why are people going to go there versus all the other pubs in town?
Actually, I think it does, but I don't know whether it's more of a car park than a beer garden, but it's got space out the back. So again, a weakness could be that, but they could actually work on that and use part of the car park and turn it into something that's going to attract people for the outside space. What about
Absolutely.
it doesn't do food? Is that a weakness?
Yes. Well, it's interesting because my immediate reaction was to say yes, but as we've just discovered, to be a thriving pub in Leighton Buzzard, you don't need to do food. But potentially that's something that could sit in the opportunities section, is that there are not many food pubs in our town centre. All of our food pubs are like scattered around the edge on the canal and are quite a walk away. So I would say that is an opportunity, is that our town centre does not have a strong it doesn't have any pubs really that offer good food. That, you know, they do like burger and chips and jacket potato, but nothing that offers, you know, like really good pub grub that you'd like to go down the pub and stay for a meal. So that's a massive opportunity there.
So if we move into the sort of external factors, the opportunities and threats, should we let's start with threats, because I think it's probably a little bit easier, because then you can paste your opportunities on top of that. So one of the threats, I guess, we've talked about the market. You know, if the market has returned, footfall in that market's returned at below pre-pandemic levels, then it's a threat to watch that market may be in decline.
Yeah, massively. I mean, consumer trends generally is always a threat to pretty much every business, because, you know, just thinking about like how much people are not drinking and how healthy people are trying to be these days. Like, actually, I think that I know personally, we always struggle when we're thinking as a couple to go out, because I am very into sports and fitness. I have been on a diet for about 25 years now. So I'm always thinking, I don't want to go to the pub and eat food, but you particularly like going out and you're naturally blessed without having to watch your waistline. So that is a massive thing in terms of like how people are feeling about their health and fitness, and whether they're drinking, whether they're eating fatty foods, all of those types of things go into it.
Yeah, great. And what about the sort of opportunities?
Yeah, so obviously we touched upon the fact that in the town centre, there are no other pubs offering a strong food offering. So that's a massive opportunity. In terms of the marketplace, there's definitely a gap there. But also in Leighton Buzzard, it sits on the Oxbridge Arc. That's the arc between Oxford and Cambridge. The Milton Keynes Leighton Buzzard area is bang in the middle of that. So it's seen massive amounts of house building and regeneration going into the area, and investment into rail and transport links. So from that perspective, the population is booming.
Is growing. Is growing, very much growing,
really
yes.
quickly.
So, you know, we talk about there may be an overarching footfall issue in pubs in general, but that could be counteracted by a significantly growing population around the area. The number of chimney pots that are going up is getting bigger, and therefore they can service that audience. What about things like entertainment or experiences or that type of thing? Do you think that's an opportunity for pubs?
Yeah, definitely. So one of the things that we see in Leighton Buzzard, but I'm sure a lot of our listeners see this across most of the UK, is that the trend in people wanting an experience-led evening when you go out. You know, you don't just want to go and sit in a pub anymore. You want to go and do something. So if there's a games night on, then you'll go to it. If there's a wine tasting night, you'll go and do that, rather than just going to the pub. And people are more than happy to pay for these things when it's a good experience. So yeah,
Absolutely.
There's an opportunity there. You know, just, you know, quiz nights. We go to a pub quiz most weeks, don't we? And it always pulls the punters in. So there is a lot of opportunity to just have that sort of event-based pub that really makes you a bit more of a destination.
Brilliant. Well, I think if you're a business owner and you've not done a SWOT analysis, I think you can see from that demonstration alone the huge value that already that small little pub has just got from us doing that. I wish they were here to hear it. Maybe we'll draw it up and pop it through their door, Claire. But yeah, I think make some time, focus on it, do your own SWOT analysis. Claire, is this an evolving document that people should be doing? Should they be doing it once a year? How would you approach this?
Yeah, I would say do it initially. And it really, you know, we've just done it in a few minutes and got a few ideas down there, which immediately should give somebody an idea of where they could grow and then also where their risks are. So even if you just spend 5 or 10 minutes and you come back to it once a month, once a quarter, just get it down on paper and just keep it refreshed. Probably at least every 6 months, I would say, have a look at it. And I will also put a template on my website that you can download for free as well. So if you go to profitcashgrowth.com and go to the free resources section, I'll make sure that there's a template there for you.
Loving it. Brilliant. Thanks. Well, let's move on to Profit Cash Growth Extra. So what have you got this week for us, Claire?
I actually thought that this was your tip this week, Simon.
I'm happy to take it. I thought you had a better one. Mine is Canva, because I absolutely love Canva. So I was late to the party with this. Hands up. I was using the Adobe packages and everything around that for my business. And Canva is mind-blowing, completely and utterly mind-blowing. For what does it cost? A tenner a month, the subscription on that, Claire?
Yeah, I think it's like $10.99 including VAT.
Blows your mind. I mean, everything, the graphics for this podcast, the graphics for our YouTube channel, entire offer graphics for my business. If you just spend the time educating and training yourself on how to use it, and it is incredibly easy to use, it is gonna pay dividends in your business 100%. I'm gutted that I sat on the sideline for a little longer than I would have liked and just dived into understanding it and training myself on it and just getting to grips with it, because it really is user friendly. Anyone could do it. It's a web-based platform, and there's not a lot it won't do, from graphics to even moving animations, which I absolutely love. You use it a lot, Claire? Do you have anything else to add to that really works? There's lots of AI tools in it as well.
Oh, the AI tools are fabulous. So, for example, if you take a photograph with a weird background and you think, oh, I want to get rid of the background, it will do that for you. You can edit the picture
as well.
Yeah. So there was a picture I had of myself and I really liked it, but I was wearing an orange shirt, and apparently the colour orange brings along thoughts of being cheap. And I didn't want to look cheap, so I thought, I'm going to change the colour of my shirt, and Canva did that for me. Also, you can type in, you could say something like, create me an image of a panda standing on an elephant eating popcorn, and it will create it for you. So it really is mind-blowing, the AI tools in Canva actually, and they are super quick and easy to use as well, because you are literally typing in what you want to see, rather than like with Adobe, you have to, I think it's a bit more about editing. But I mean, when I looked into Canva, because I didn't really know much about it, I was staggered to learn that Canva's only been going 10 years and they've got 100...
Australian lady, yeah?
Yeah, an Australian techpreneur created it only 10 years ago. It's floated now, and I think she only owns about 20% of it. But it's got 135 million users. So it's absolutely staggering how popular Canva is, and there just doesn't seem to be anything else that's rivaling it. There's lots of other platforms out there, but nothing that seems to be touching Canva's dominance when it comes to sort of small business design and content software. It truly is phenomenal.
Yeah. It's the non-pro element as well, isn't it? Adobe are fantastic, but you really need to know your stuff to use the Adobe packages. I use a bunch of them, but I probably scratch the surface of 5% of what they're capable of doing. They really are professional tools, whereas Canva really crosses all, it gives you the professional results, but with an amateur ability to use it. It's an incredible business and tool. I think that's going to go on to be absolutely massive.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it already is massive, isn't it? It does over $1 billion turnover a year, but it's not just for small business as well. That was the other thing that sort of blew my mind when I started. I think I read an article about Canva, which has got me going on this. But big companies like L'Oreal use it in their marketing department. So the power of the tool is phenomenal, but it's done in an incredibly user-friendly way. You literally go on a website and you can figure it out. Like, you don't need any training. But if you do, of course, there's so many people doing like free YouTube videos and stuff telling you how to use it. So yeah, Canva is mind-blowing.
Brilliant. Well, thanks for another great week's chat, Claire. As always, if you go to profitcashgrowth.com, you've got all the free resource and library there. You get the SWOT analysis template that we've discussed. Also, go to the YouTube channel, Profit Cash Growth, if you want to look at the video around SWOT analysis or any of the videos that we cover on this podcast to go into a deeper dive. And as we discussed last week, there's a free assessment for your business, the Profit Cash Growth Assessment. You can answer 20 questions, quickly understand what your blind spots are and how you can build a strategy to plug them and improve your knowledge and your capability to help you improve your profits, increase your cash flow, and grow your business.